Welcome to Wellthy Living Conversations. I'm Lisa, your host and founder of Wellthy Living. It's here that I connect with a variety of people to have inspiring and insightful conversations to help you live a meaningful, connected and well life, both personally and professionally. So if you're a regular listener of my show or you follow my work, you know that I strongly believe that self-knowledge is a major key to sustainable success. So today I'm chatting with an incredibly knowledgeable and wise change agent, Melanie Mideggs, who brings an additional perspective to the whole self-knowledge puzzle. Melanie is a psychosomatic therapist, face reader and speaker who I came across over many years through women's business networks. I then had the opportunity to spend some time with Mel, getting to know her on a much deeper level through curating her as a panelist for one of my Ultimate Girls Week Away 2020 panel discussions. So welcome, Mel. It's so great to finally record an episode with you.
I know. It's so great to be here. Good to connect with you again. It's been so long.
I know, it feels like forever, such a difference. Like when we connected and saw each other last time, we were like in paradise in Fiji, having a great time. Little did we know what was going to go on with the world from then until now.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But it's we just go with what's happening, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Mel is an astute businesswoman who masterfully combines and applies her business acumen alongside spiritual principles and philosophies. So originally from Australia, Mel has been living in Bali, Indonesia for over 6 years, where she's developed a deep understanding of the ripple effect of conscious consumerism and chooses to use her business not only to bring greater self-awareness to her clients' lives, but as a vehicle to create impact in the lives of the community she lives in. Mel's daily action taking role models what ethical leadership really looks like. So in today's episode, I want to discuss both the piece of self-knowledge that Mel brings through her favourite psychosomatic therapy tool, face reading, as well as how Mel has spent time connecting with herself and now uses her own self-awareness to align her values with her business model and her lifestyle choices. So how does that sound, Mel?
Sounds great. Thank you. Sounds wonderful.
Great. So let's start with self-knowledge. So I define self-knowledge as knowing yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And from my understanding, face reading uses the physical to bring awareness to all of our choices in our other areas of our lives.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So I'm so fascinated by this and I have no idea how it all works. And, you know, I'm wondering if you can provide, like we can start off providing a little bit more detail about face reading and how it provides so much intel.
Yeah. So I guess why I love face reading so much, because of course, like the body, mind, emotion connection is always there, plus the spiritual aspect too. And as I was growing up, like I always loved this stuff. Like when I was a kid, you know, in school holidays, I was like reading about chakra energies and all of these sorts of things. But I would find it quite frustrating that I could never see it. It's like sometimes I could feel things and sense things, but, you know, I always wanted to be like, I wish I could see your aura and, you know, all the different colors and those sorts of things. So, you know, years and years later, I learned to be a psychosomatic therapist, and that was really the groundbreaking knowledge to see the energy and how that plays out in the physical. So it was all of a sudden it became possible to see the energy through the physical body, and then it made it tangible all of a sudden for me. And so then I was like, right, now I know what we're kind of working with. Whereas before I was kind of, you know, you try and imagine wheels spinning and what energies look like, masculine, feminine, all that sort of thing. But now it's like, if you see it in the physical, you know that something's actually playing out in the energetic space.
So is that what psychosomatic therapy is? Like, just if we go one step backwards, what is psychosomatic therapy?
Yeah, so psychosomatics literally breaks down to mind-body connection. So psyche meaning the mind, soma relating to the body. So mind-body connection. And your muscles remember everything. So that's why there's a lot of emotional release techniques that happen with psychosomatics through a bodywork point of view. But I prefer to use just the face reading tool aspect of that. So basically all of our experiences that we've had, it's like if you imagine when you drive a car, when you didn't know how to drive a car, you would jump in and you're trying to coordinate your feet and your hands and your, you know, indicators and all that sort of stuff. And now you do it so automatically, and there's a part of your body that remembers it. So you don't even have to think about it. Your body's just responding to that situation in that way. Yeah. And that's a positive, you know, because then you know how to do it. But it also, your body is responding to aspects of your world and your life constantly. So the way that you respond to different things will be based on what your past experience has been. And so I guess to take that further is like understanding your body will understand what you're holding on to, what your zone of genius is, and what you can start to shift in yourself to then make life and your experiences a lot easier.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. And I think that for a lot of people, it's a lot easier to connect with the physical and understand the physical and then be guided to how that plays out in all other areas than connect necessarily always to the emotional or the spiritual or what else is going on. I mean, there are some people who are brilliant at doing that as well, but I suppose across the mainstream, when you can connect and see things like, you know, and use your senses in your sight and, you know, see things for real tangibly, then it's kind of allows a more easier understanding of how to apply it if you're obviously guided in how to do that.
Yeah. And what that does is actually put your mind at rest. The mind is a really powerful tool, and if it can't explain something or can't see something, sometimes it's the thing it's that point of resistance of understanding a bigger picture, a bigger mysterious unknown kind of element.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go a bit more detail into face reading, like, is this something you came across when you were studying psychosomatics, or is this something additionally?
Yeah, so I learned it when I was becoming a psychosomatic therapist, and basically everything that you see in your face is actually replicated in your whole body. So this is a summary of everything below it, and that's why I love it as a tool, because I don't have to look at your whole body. I don't have to go through your legs and your arms and your hips and all the rest of it. I can see what's going on, you know, from looking at your face. So part of training to be a psychosomatic therapist is you actually spend a really long time looking at every aspect of your body, seeing the reflection of what's been shown to you through your body. And then you get to the face, and this is just a nice little summary.
So where does that come from? Like, is it Eastern philosophy? Is it, I mean, you talk about body language, people talk about their face, and, you know, you look at criminologists or whatever, or detectives, and they look at people's face, and if they're looking this way, they mean that. If they're lying, if they do this, or they tilt their head, or, you know, things like that are in the mainstream and sort of looked upon as sort of clues into someone's behavior. Is it very different to that, or is it something where's it been developed?
Yeah, so it's different to say the detective lied, you know, like I can't tell if someone's lying which way. I'm not trained in, you know, where their eyes are going and if someone's lying and all that. Herman Muller was the teacher that I had, and he created this psychosomatic therapy practice basically. And from what I can gather, after doing all the study and reading his textbooks and all those sorts of things, it's a bit of a combination, actually. There's definitely Ayurvedic in there. There's traditional Chinese medicine. It works very closely with the chakra system. So there's, it's a fusion. And I guess that's why I love it, because I've always loved all these different healing modalities, and it's kind of comes together and you can connect the dots to them. So even when I speak to someone who is a specialist in Ayurvedic medicine, or someone who's a specialist in Chinese traditional medicine, we, you know, and then we start talking about the body, and we're like, oh yeah, because that connects with this one? And, you know, it's all connected. It's just basically finding ones that, you know, therapies that resonate with you, and what can help you at the time that you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you say that, I mean, if this guy has developed it and he's brought in all of these different modalities and it's a bit of a fusion,
Mm-hmm.
does it have a concrete science to it as well? Or is it just based on more Eastern or alternative modalities that he's studied and realised that certain areas affected, you know, like were the indicator of certain other problems or things that were going on?
Well, Herman was actually I'm pretty sure, I can't quote you on the title, but it was like a sports scientist. He worked with athletes for a really long time, learning how they could use their body to really accelerate, you know, whatever athletic field that they were in. So how to really use your body to the best effect. So he learnt the mechanics, the anatomy. I mean, even I have, as well as a massage therapist. Like, you've got to learn about anatomy and physiology as well, to really understand how it does all fit together. And it takes you know, a lot of wisdom and knowledge there. In terms of scientific, what do you mean by that? Like,
I just probably mean grounded in like a lot of studies and tests, and, you know, a proven, like I suppose science just tries to prove things through through studies, as opposed to just through just wisdom.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure of what scientific process he went through. If he went through one, I'm not quite sure. But I do know that I've read, and I don't know, I've lost count, somewhere between 650 faces over the last few years, and I still get blown away by how precise it is and how people respond. You know, I meet someone when I do a face reading. A lot of the time, I've never met that person before, you know, and our sessions go for an hour, and they're blown away by how much I know about them simply by looking at their face.
Amazing.
And it just proves to me that our body is continuously giving us feedback. It's continuously showing us what we need to look at to either, one, become the best version of ourselves, or two, to actually reach the goal that we're trying to achieve in creating for ourselves. Because you know as well as I do, like when you might have your big dream, but then we need to work through all of these things that actually hold us back from making that real.
Yeah, absolutely. The personal development behind the business development.
Yeah, and that's why I love it, because to me it's a fusion of both.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do one without the other, and if you are doing one without the other, then there's probably something mismatched with the business, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. So if we get a little bit into more detail, because I find this whole thing really fascinating, and you look at, like, I'd imagine that you've got, you know, when I think of my face, I think, you know, you've got your forehead, your eyes, your nose, your ears, your mouth, your chin. I don't know if there's other areas that you look at, but to me, they're probably some of the main areas of your face. Can you share with us some insights into these different areas, and maybe some of the, I suppose, usable information that if someone was listening today and they go, oh yeah, I've got a nose like that or a forehead like that, and how they could use that information to apply to things in their life?
Yeah. So each feature of your face relates to a different chakra energy. So I always ask, you don't need to know about the chakras if you have a session, but you know, I always ask how familiar people are with that. And usually people are familiar, say, with the first three kind of chakra energies, and then it gets a bit kind of wafty. So I guess through looking at the features of the face, you get a really grounded aspect of what that chakra energy is looking like. And each chakra energy relates to a different area of life. It relates to different emotions, obviously the physical aspect as well. And so, say, for example, your chin is related to your base chakra energy. So this is all related to your connection to community, to tribe, your family, how you feel supported within yourself, how you feel supported with the people around you. And the shape of your chin will share a lot about how you respond to that. So somebody who's got a very square type chin is going to be a lot more practical than someone who's got a very pointy chin. So someone who's got a very pointy chin, I always do this thing where I say, if you put your hands like this, and it's like being on a table, and depending on how far your face rolls along the line of your chin, will show how practical or how much more emotional you are when it comes to responding to different aspects in life. So someone who's very practical, not a lot's going to, if something takes them by surprise, they're going to go into more of a like, okay, let's just figure out what the problem is and let's just work through the problem. Whereas someone who's more emotional, so got that more pointy chin, they may go into a more of emotional response and not be able to take action so easily. So one's not right and compared to the other. There's no right or wrong in face reading, but it's knowing, okay, so if I'm more of an emotional person and I know that I go into a bit of a spin when things take me by surprise, what people, organization, what kind of support can I create around myself so it doesn't become such an overload? Rather, I can still feel my emotions, but I know that something's going to happen. We can still take steps forward. Do I speak to my friend who's also very emotional and we can all go into a big spin, or do I call my friend who's a little bit more practical who might help ground me to then know what the next step is? Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And I think that's what I love about, and that's why I am so passionate about self-knowledge being the key to sustainable success, and why it's so important, and how all these different aspects, and I don't claim to know, even though I work a lot from the basis of self-knowledge, I don't claim to know all the different areas that we got to get to know in ourselves. And that's why I love bringing on people like you, Mel, and you can talk on an area which I have no idea about, and, all different parts, because, I do a lot on obviously values and needs, and coming from that place and really assessing those. And I mean, they would also come into what you do, I would suspect, if for example, like the example you just gave around the chin, it's like, well, working out, well, what would my needs be if I reacted really emotionally? And now I'm getting that confirmation that my body is birthed in a way that probably prepares me for being that kind of character. And so in having that information, well, what's the best way to deal with it? And like you said, it's not about good or bad. It's actually just about intel and data. And the more data we can have, the better our decisions can be moving forward.
Yeah. And especially, there's pros and cons to both too. And I do want to point this out because even as a practical person, that person obviously can be emotional, but they may need to actually listen to their emotions a lot more. Like I believe, particularly in the West, we've become so kind of dogmatic machines. This is what we've got to do. Come on, let's just move on, that kind of thing. Whereas that's not necessarily a skill all the time. Sometimes that's actually more detrimental to someone's health than actually feeling what's going on to then make a better decision rather than what your head's always thinking. Yeah. Whereas that's where the more sensitive type people can really help people to become in tune with that as well.
Well, I suppose that's kind of in a way, like the nurture versus nature model. So in your nature, you might be a certain way, but if you nurture certain areas that otherwise, if you don't, could be your vulnerabilities, then you can turn them into your strengths if you nurture them. So I suppose it's that same thing. And in the end, it's just first like get the core foundations happening to actually get to know yourself first and know where you're at. What do I have in a nature perspective way, or in a lived experience or conditioned way? And then from that place, what do I want to, I suppose, achieve or feel like? And then what do I need to do or improve on or set myself up with certain systems or supports, etc., like you said, to be able to do that. So it's amazing, the more pieces of the puzzle we can have, the better our choices can become and the more abundant our lifestyles can be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a game as well. I like at the start, when you start learning about yourself, it can be a bit full on because you're like, oh God, I'm like this and I've got to change to this and but I think the more that we play with it. And that's how I do it, because I'll be like, oh, let's just see what happens if I do it this way instead of that way now. You get to know where your happy medium is, if that makes sense. So you're not going to extremes on whatever your natural tendencies are.
Yeah. I mean, that's, just the whole idea of just being curious.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Curious is the best place.
So if, just because I think a lot of people will be quite intrigued by all of this sort of thing, and for you, you sort of live and breathe it all the time, but a lot of the listeners won't. So you've given that little information about the chin and the shaped chin. Can we just give maybe one little bit of information on each body part, like as in the main ones?
Yeah, okay. So your mouth is related to your sacral chakra energy, which is all about the taste you have for life. So this is really where we hold, how much pleasure we have. It's our creativity, pleasure, abundance, and well-being center. So, for those of us who, at times when life is really rough, you may find that the lips become a little bit thinner. Particularly if you've got a smaller mouth, it could be hard to trust people, which means you need to really develop that trust level with yourself to be able to trust other people. And then the larger mouth you have, the more open those people are. So the sacral chakra energy is also related to our relationship. So the chin is our us in community. The mouth is us and one-on-one relationship. So how well do we express our needs and our wants and our desires? And how good is that communication between the two as well? So the top lip has to do with your creativity and sensuality, and the bottom lip is the communication. So depending on how big, small, big lips, thin lips, that you can get so much from this. If you've got dimples, it means charismatic. To me, this is one of my favorite chakra energies, because it is all about pleasure and it's about creativity and, all these different possibilities. In our body, it's around our reproductive area, our hip area. So it's like, how good are we feeling? The one thing you can do if you are feeling low is just, remember your mouth, pucker up. Say something good.
Maybe that's why people suck lollipops.
Well, this is also the center where we hold our addictions. So, with the pros come the cons. And, another part is that addiction is rife in our world as well, in so many different ways. And when we're not feeling good within ourselves, we will reach for the lollipop, we'll reach for that sweet thing to literally make our life sweeter. What's going to make us feel better? What's going to make us feel the way we want to feel, because we're not actually finding that within ourselves. So that's what the mouth really talks about and reflects back about someone's own sense of self and sense of pleasure with who they are,
Yeah, interesting. And it's interesting that when you think about most addictions, say even cigarette smoking or, it's all done often through the mouth.
Mm-hmm. And that too, just with the cigarettes, usually is also something to do with grief as well, because that's to do with the lungs. So it relates to the heart chakra as well. But yeah, that's going down a rabbit hole of all the addictions.
We could do a whole nother episode on that.
Yeah. So moving up, your nose here is related to your solar plexus energy. So it's all about your own personal identity and how you step out into the world. So the nose is literally the only feature of the face that steps away from the face. So it really is about how am I stepping out and who am I being? Depending on the length of the nose, the width of the nose, how high the bridge is here, will tell a lot about your own personal leadership. And it is about your relationship with yourself. How comfortable are you with yourself? I know for me personally, I've had to really develop a nice loving relationship with my nose, because I didn't used to like the shape of my nose. I've never been at one with that until I did psychosomatics, and then I understood what that actually reflects about me. And I was like, oh, I'm enjoying that. Okay, let's stand in that space a little more rather than trying to hide it, be worried about it. Solar plexus energy is all about confidence and self-doubt. So, when we start doubting ourselves, when we start thinking, oh, I'm not good enough, who am I to step out and do X, Y, Z? You know, what you really want to do is feel confident and know who you are and be like, yeah, this is who I am and this is what I stand for and what I want to be, do, have in this world, you know?
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So the one thing I guess for your viewers or listeners is that you can, if you touch the tip of your nose, it can either be really squishy or it can be quite hard. So if it's really, really squishy, just be mindful of being people pleaser, like people pleaser tendencies, you know, putting others before yourself, not really being strong with your boundaries in terms of what you need to do for yourself first. If it's really hard, just be mindful of how hard you can be on yourself, because that can actually go out and start being hard on other people in terms of judgment. So being judgmental on yourself can mean that you start being quite judgmental on those around you too. So yeah, it can be a nice little reminder.
I must be medium, because I'm hard on myself and sometimes accommodating others.
It can, yeah, like I know for me personally, my nose has definitely become harder over the years. It's still soft. I definitely have people pleaser tendencies, and I know that because I'm double jointed in my joints in my body as well. So knees, elbows, ankles, all has to do with solar plexus as well. So, you know, if you roll a knee, if you hurt your knee, there's usually something going on about personal confidence and personal identity.
That's interesting.
But you can always change it. Like, you know, I'm always going to be double jointed, but it's my awareness of how I need to really pay attention to my personal boundaries. And that's going to be like a lifelong lesson for me. It's not just going to shift overnight, but it's something that I need to continually, you know, keep track of, if that makes sense.
Interesting. So when you just said that your nose has got harder, so it's not about necessarily always just how you're born, but actually it can change as you...
Yeah, your face changes every single day. So, and it is a reflection of your personal emotional well-being. So how you're feeling on the inside will be shown on your face. The bone structure is like the ancestry aspect. So that's like the hereditary aspects of a family that we can take on. But the flesh and the skin, that all changes all the time. There'll be times where your lips will be thin, and then all of a sudden, if you pay attention, your lips can actually grow because you're feeling more pleasure in life. It's like you can have a really soft, squishy nose, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's getting a bit harder because I'm just getting a little bit more, you know, into my boundaries on what's going to work for me and what's not. So
yeah, and it's interesting because our ears and our nose are the two areas of our body that don't stop growing.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
It don't stop growing.
That's why when you look at...
Isn't that interesting though? Because it's about your solar plexus. It's your personal identity. It never stops growing. You're always going to be stepping out. Yeah.
So, you know, when you said your nose is like your leadership, I think as people get older, they become more leaders of their own life because other things fall away, and what really matters comes further to the forefront. And, you know, they're wiser and all those things as you get older. And your nose is something that was always, that's why when you look at older people, they've always got bigger noses and big ears.
Yeah. And isn't that interesting though? Because you'd know as well as I do, like when you start hitting those bigger milestones like 40 and even 50, you know, everyone always says it's better because they're just more of themselves. You know, I know myself so well now. I don't care about anybody else. Whereas when, you know, your solar plexus is developed between the age of 14 and 21. That's when it kicks in, when we're teenagers. Like, we're rebelling, we're questioning authority, or like, who am I? We're trying and testing all this stuff. And then, you know, we go through these phases of wanting to be like everybody else to then get older and go, God, I just want to be myself. Like, you know?
Absolutely. So if we move from the nose now and we look at what's the next, the eyes?
Eyes. So your eyes are related to your heart chakra energy. And this is why they say the eyes are the window to the soul. So when you're connecting with someone's eyes, you're really connecting to their soul essence. I believe that we actually live life through our heart chakra. So the heart chakra is the middle chakra of the first 7. So the lower 3 chakras, these are really earthbound chakras, which are a lot more grounded and a lot more kind of materialistic in terms of how it plays out in life. Whereas then above the eyes, the next three chakras are very etheric. They're more not so tangible. They're more to do with the spiritual aspects of ourselves. So the heart is where we really want to live through and, come from that space. So through the eyes, depending on how big they are, how small they are, where they're placed on the face, will show a lot about how open or vulnerable someone's going to be, or perhaps how armored and closed off they'll be as well. Again, there's no right or wrong about it, but it is good to know about yourself, because if you are someone who's got a really armored heart, it's good to know that, so you can start, pushing the boundary of just opening up that little bit more to people around you. And it's also good from an outsider's point of view, because I would say that your eyes are probably a little bit more squinty than my eyes. Mm-hmm. So to really get to your heart, I'm going to have to spend time with you. I'm going to have to really get to know you before you actually let me in, to a real sort of intimate sort of space. If people don't know that, it can be interpreted the wrong way, because some people be like, oh, well, they're not really, conversational or, that sort of thing. But in actual fact, it doesn't mean that person doesn't want to get to know them. It's just the way that they need to be able to feel safe to open up their heart. So someone who's got bigger eyes like myself, that has its own little problematics, like, whereas you might let everybody in. And so, you may feel like there's a little bit not discerning enough about who's being let in and who's not being let in, that kind of thing. So there's a lot that you can tell about the eyes and the heart space. But ultimately, this is where we connect.
Yeah. Amazing. And the ears?
So your ears, I don't really relate to, they're related to your throat chakra, but it tells a lot about, it goes in alignment with your eyebrows as well. So eyebrows and ears are throat chakra elements. And your ears, depending if they're pinned back or if they're pulled forward, will say a lot about how your experience has been as a child. And so that will relate a lot to the way that you communicate. If they're really pinned back, there was probably a tendency to be seen and not heard. So it's just like, you just be good and sit there and, that kind of thing. If they're pulled out, if they're really sticking out, that can mean that person's listening out for danger quite a lot. So they want to be prepared. So literally, like they're trying to be 2 steps ahead of the game, so they can feel in themselves safe to know what's happening and what's coming forward. With the eyebrows, we always have lots of fun in workshops with the eyebrows in terms of the shape, because it will show a lot. But the main thing to remember with your eyebrows, particularly if you're communicating or speaking in front of people and want to be heard really well, is have a really nice curve. Don't make them straight. Don't make them too sharp and angular. But the most important thing is to make is that they're defined, so we can see them. We really want to be able to see them. And something that's quite interesting is that if you look at the evolution of the woman's eyebrow over the years, like if you look back to, say, the 80s, we're plucking them out to death, so they're just like a really thin line, but the women's voices weren't really amplified at that time. And then it's interesting that we've just gone into this phase where women, and young women in particular, are really making these bold, big eyebrows. Yes. It's like they're actually amplifying their throat chakra energy so they can be heard. So yeah, and I've had a lot of clients who have played with their eyebrows, particularly if they've had light ones and they've decided to start colouring them in. And the way that their communication is felt by their audience or the person they're speaking to is so much more clearer than when it was too fine and a bit fragmented.
Interesting. That's so interesting. And what about when you were talking about the ears, I was thinking of, how like there are people who have the lobes and no lobes. Does that have any?
Oh, yeah. Like if it's connected really. Yeah. So like if it's connected, those people can be a bit stubborn. They kind of just hold on to what their thoughts are, and they can be hard to shift out of that box of that thought process. If you've got really fleshy lobes, again, it's a bit like the nose. People pleaser, a little bit too flexible sometimes, and just have to be mindful of that.
So interesting, Mel.
Yeah.
So thanks for going through all those areas, because I think that gives people that idea of, oh, they can think about it on their own face and resonate. And if they're interested, they can obviously, get in touch with you and find out more. So when it comes to something that came to mind when you were talking, especially about the nose, was plastic surgery. So a lot of people that have big noses, not a lot, but a percentage of people that have big noses go and get nose reductions. Now, how does that impact? Like, how much of it is what your initial nose was and how much of it is what your new nose is?
Yeah. So I believe, this is my thoughts on this because I get asked it a lot, is, say for example, and usually people will get the plastic surgery if they've got the big bump in their nose, right? But in actual fact, if you do have like a Roman type nose, that bump, it's a real leadership nose. It's somebody who can take up that space and be able to lead people and, create something real. And then when they get that cut off, that hasn't disappeared, but the way that people will perceive you will be different, because everybody's face reading all the time. Just because you don't know the aspects of what you're looking at, it doesn't mean that you're not face reading. You're picking
I'm
up.
sitting here thinking you're just looking at every aspect of my face.
And I don't, by the way, I get asked that all the time. I went to a birthday party on the weekend and, inevitably someone goes, what do you do? And I was like, face reading. They're like, what is, you're reading my face now? I'm like, no, work's work. But but we do respond to people given the energy that they're giving off in their face. So, it doesn't mean that you can't be in that leadership position, but the way we see you as that leader possibly will have shifted depending on what you've done with the shape of your nose. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's not that you haven't left that essence of yourself, but you have changed it somewhat.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I think about a girlfriend of mine, and I think about all of like her husband or all of her past boyfriends. She's always been attracted to men with big noses.
Yeah, and maybe it's because they'll take the lead. They'll,
stand up.
However that plays out. Yeah.
It's quite funny, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's really, really.
And it is interesting because I know from workshops that I've done, there's a lot of what came up. I had a woman who was Jewish in New York. She said nearly every Jewish woman will get that, plastic surgery to get that bump taken off their nose. And I was like, wow, imagine if they actually knew what it was, because this is what happens too. And I said it happened to me as well. Once you know what your face represents, you own that part of yourself so much more, because you understand what it's related to and what your natural way of being in this world is.
I mean, that's really interesting, because when you just said that, I'm thinking now along cultures, and different cultures have different aspects on their faces that are more or less pronounced. So, yeah, a lot of Jewish people have, they say have bigger noses, not all, but, a lot. You look at Asians and they've got smaller noses and wider noses. Different.
Something on that I find interesting, because being here in Bali, the Balinese tend to have a very low bridge here. So their eyes are very much in line with the lower part here, which means that they feel everything. And they're such a spiritual culture. So that makes complete sense. It's just like they're feeling everything all the time. But what that means is sometimes they won't be so practical. And the same with the West. Sometimes we get too much into the science and like the facts and the figures and blah, blah, blah. And we actually just need to get into our heart space. So this is where unity is so important, and we can all learn so much from each other. And there isn't a right and a wrong way. It's like we all bring certain aspects to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the best collaboration pot, because even within our faces, it's given a guide to you guys, in this culture, that you can bring this because you've naturally would, have better skills or whatever for that sort of thing. And you guys are better at this, and how can we therefore as a team work together?
Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Wouldn't
it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to know if you've done have you taken it in your own interest? I know that you're not necessarily in a work-wise yet, but have you taken it in your own interest to look at the different cultural things and face reading and how the differences are with different cultural faces?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've read faces from people all around the world, and I don't read as I'm going out, but even I do notice these things, natural traits that seem to come out, in different cultural faces, and particularly that aspect that I talked about, the West being more logical, the East being more sensitive. I mean, you could have a whole conversation around that in terms of that's the balance that really needs to start shifting back right now, I think, in the world, because the West have just taken it too far, and it's like, the mind can't rule. We've got to have our heart in it. And in fact, the heart space is, as I said, we've got to live through the heart chakra. And if we start cutting that off, shutting that down, all sorts of stuff starts happening.
Absolutely. And you being in Bali, you'd see it every single day. So it's not like you can ignore what's going on in that aspect. So you really can, a lot of confronting stuff really, really gets in your vision every day. And so, yeah, even more so, you've got that lived experience to talk through that. And I definitely want to talk through that a little bit more when we move on to and away from some of the face reading stuff. But there's just a little bit more with the face reading stuff that I'm just really interested in. And firstly, when you look at people that have disabilities like blindness or deafness, I mean, deafness is obviously, like, is that impactful? Like, because their eyes would be different and their ears, like, it's just different. Does that make a difference? And if they're born like that, or whether they have an accident and that happens, like people get an eye injury and then one eye ends up closed from that point on.
Yeah, I believe everything happens for a reason, and all it's doing is bringing your attention to something. So I have actually done a face reading with a man who was, he was deaf, and this was right at the beginning, actually. So it was quite confronting for me when it happened. It would have been in the probably first 6 months that I started face reading, and I had a market stall at your Monday markets, and I was there, and but it was one of the most profound face readings I've ever done, because he was lip reading me as I was speaking to him. And these are huge shifts that happen, and how you learn to really grow your levels of compassion, because I was reading him. I didn't know him from anyone. And he, his eyes would well up with tears because I was really seeing him. Whereas I can imagine there would be such frustration of not being able to communicate, how you felt, what you needed, who you really were, because of that disability. But a stranger could sit in front of him and say, yeah, like, you're super creative and you've got this going on, la, 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 la. And it was amazing. It actually is probably one of my most favorite face readings that I've ever done, because it just proved again, like, if you can really look and see someone for who they are, not just see them, but just really connect with them, there's so much we can learn from each other without even having to say anything. So I had another, actually the same market. I had a few challenges there, but that's why I went. That was my intention. I was like, okay, I want to, go and try everything. There was another man that wanted a face reading, and he was challenged me a couple. He's like, why would I want to do this? And I was like, you don't have to do it. I'm not telling you to do it. If you want one, you can have one. If you don't, keep on walking, He came back 3 times. The third time he was finally like, okay, I'm going to get one. And I did the face reading. And then at the end, he said, I've got a glass eye. And I said, well, good for you. How am I going, I'm not here to like try and pick what's not real about you. But the point was, there were so many things that I said that was around his heart chakra, and he knew that as well. So if something happens, if there's an accident or something, it's doing, it's bringing your attention to that particular chakra energy, and every aspect of that will be a theme in your life. So for the guy who was deaf, that was throat chakra. So it's all about communication. It's going to be one of those lessons in life for him, in this lifetime.
Yeah, brilliant. And it is. I mean, look, obviously some people are going to choose to believe that different things impact, like, are related to different chakras. Some people don't believe the chakra system at all, and other people, are halfway there and halfway not. But for me, I think that the more pieces of the puzzle we can have, the more information and intel that we can bring to the table, the better our choices are going to be, and the more aligned they can be with what we want to achieve and what our needs actually are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm just aware of time, Mel, and I know that that you've got another meeting after. So I just want to maybe wrap some of that up, and what would be some maybe takeaway message from what your beliefs are around reading the face and really understanding the body, and maybe a little message about that before we move on to the next part.
Yeah, I would say slowing down to speed up is really important. After being here in Bali for this long now, around 6 years, I have learned so much more about how to be in tune with my body and how I'm feeling compared to the West. The West is very busy, and we can get distracted, and we can be pulled in so many directions, so we can't feel what's going on. So slowing down to speed up, so you actually are present with your body, how you're feeling and what that's showing you.
Yeah, beautiful. And, like, just using that body as your inner compass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. Brilliant. So I want to just quickly talk, because I know that we could do a whole episode on this as well, but I really want to talk a little bit about some of your own personal experiences and how your self-awareness has enabled you to align with your values and adjust your business model and lifestyle choices accordingly. So, yeah, if we can talk a little bit about that and what that means to you.
Yeah, so I founded the Business Chakra System back in 2014 when I was here in Ubud in Bali, because I was trying to create my own online business. I was doing face reading and the psychosomatic sessions. But I kept hitting hurdles all the time. And I had this breakdown. I remember the day so clearly. I had this little studio place, and I had this little banana chair at the front, and I was just having my own big cry going, what the hell is going on? And then I asked myself, what do I know really well? And I was like, I know the chakra system really well. And I was like, right, well, I know what's happening in my own personal chakra system right now. And then I just went, well, what if business had a chakra system? What would that mean? And it was such a pivotal moment, because it all lined up, because basically each chakra relates to a different area of business. And the emotional aspects, or the emotional intelligence that's behind each of those chakras, absolutely lines up to those emotions that we feel behind the scenes in business as well. So not only then did I create something that would help me align how to dissect and look at each aspect of my business to make it work, I was also able to tune into my body at the same time to make sure I was on the right path. Is this making sense as I'm describing it this way?
Yep.
Yeah. And it wasn't only the emotions, it was also the physical aspects then that started playing out. Lower sore back is a big one, and one that so many people feel. And that's really related to your base chakra and about how you feel supported, particularly how you feel supported financially. So if you do have a tendency to get a sore back, for anyone listening, just see what's happening in your financial world when that sore back kicks in. Don't always think it's just because, I don't know, you're getting old, or you've been sitting down all day. Like, I've been, ever since I created that system, which was, 6 years ago now, I've been playing with it to see how it happens. And instantly, if I drop into a space of fear, overwhelm, or anxiety, no kidding, my back starts to play up, even if subconsciously I might not even really be feeling those feelings, but like at the back of my mind there's like a niggle, but the physical might actually start playing out before the emotional stuff starts playing out as well. Because you kind of like, no, it's great, I got it, I'm not going to fall into that fear space or whatever, so you keep going, but physically it may start to play out. So that is basically how I live my life now. Like, not just in business but outside of business too, is I really listen to what's going on and what's feeling right for me, and learn from my body. I used to get kind of upset and frustrated when I kept getting these like physical things play out in my body, but now I am really grateful and I rejoice on it. So even just last month, I had all these things playing out with my feet and my toes, and I was in bed for a week and I was like, my God, what's going on? But it really was releasing, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, our body remembers. It remembers our past experiences. And when you start to shift the way you behave, your body actually needs to release what it's been holding on to become that new version of yourself. And I believe that there's different ways you can do that. You can force it out through body work and things, but it also may just come out through physical aspects of, you know, whatever that needs to be for you. And because I'd done so much in a particular area of my life to do with the mindset and the emotional aspect, it was like the physical had to catch up. And so that was basically how it happened. So that is how I use it all together now. Like, yeah. I never ignore my body. I'm always tuning into what's going on.
Beautiful. And, you know, I think that that's great leadership in itself, that you're role modeling exactly what you're encouraging your clients to do. So they can really, you know, and you're very open and honest with your experiences and times when you get that information, and that you're not necessarily, you know, everything is perfect. It's just that when these situations happen, like you said, you are able to have gratitude for the information so that you can then make more aligned choices.
Yeah. And it's not easy. God, that last one. I was like, what's going on? But, you know, I think that's where the integrity, like anybody teaching anything, no matter what you're doing, when you choose to be integral with your work, it will start playing out because you're choosing to be integral with that. So, you know, it's just the way, it's like just the way the universe works, basically.
Yeah. And taking personal responsibility, I think, is a huge one.
Yeah. And why also I have chosen to be more playful with it, because there have been times where that did become pretty hard. It was like, geez, it's one thing after the other. If you can bring that playful intention to it as well, it can help things to shift faster. You learn your lessons a little bit lighter. You don't have to go so deep, dark and heavy all the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good piece to offer, because a lot of people that are in the personal development world that want to become better all the time, and which is fantastic, they do go often to that deep, dark and heavy space in order to feel that's the only way that they can actually do that. And there is other ways to do that. So I'm really glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what we discussed before, just briefly, was we sort of mentioned briefly when I talked about cultures and how there's a difference and the collaboration and all working together. I know that you, in your lived experience being in Bali for 6 years, you get to see a lot of what's happening on the ground and the lives that are impacted and the ripple effect of what people's choices are. And I know that that is really close to your heart and is a part of your value, become part of your value system, and that you use your work as a vehicle to be a change maker. So not only affecting the lives of the people that you're doing the readings of and giving them guidance so that they can live their most aligned life, but you've also take that and feed back into the community. And I wondered if you could maybe just share a little bit about that and some of the things that you might want to get across about that, where your purpose in your business has become more than just profit.
Yeah, like I have a saying that what I would love to see change is, usually it works like this, and you've got economics equals humanity and sustainability. It's like we've got to have the money to be able to look after ourselves and to create a good, a sustainable world. When in actual fact, I think it needs to be flipped. where it's all about humanity and sustainability, actually will equal the economics. The economics will come when we look after ourselves and when we become sustainable in how we work. It will just flow in, you know, instead of doing this hard push for the money to then look after ourselves because we're so wrecked from what we created in the first place. So that's really my main message, I guess, in terms of everything that I teach and teaching people how to tune into their body. Right now, because of what's happening in the world in particular, I guess living in Bali, I've seen what's happened when where countries have relied on tourism so much. I mean, the whole tourism industry has just fallen over, basically, international tourism anyway. And that has affected so many families and people here on the island. Like over 80% of tourism in Bali, of income in Bali is from tourism. And actually of that, 70% of that is actually offshore. It's not even the people in Bali that get that money. And that's from international investors and things like that, developing and creating the tourist places here on Bali. So, and it's a big topic, and we could talk about it a lot, because it's not about, we also have to be mindful that different cultures just have different ways of doing things. But the main thing is that the West doesn't feel they have to come in and change the East. I think that's what I get most upset about with Bali, but still knowing that I am here as a Westerner. I have been here for 6 years as well. But changing another culture to suit what the West needs, if that makes sense. And I don't feel that that's the way, and that's what we really need to become more aware of as a tourism industry as a whole, because now, I see it every day. And the local people, my local community, my local Balinese families, you know, they're going into their big ceremonial period at the moment, and they don't have the money to do all the things that they would normally do for that. And that's really precious to them. And all of a sudden they can't do that. So I think mindfulness around where we spend our money, where are we staying? Is that money staying with the people? I mean, it would be the same in Australia, even anywhere in the world. It's like, where is our money going in terms of what we're purchasing, and who is that feeding off to? Who's really benefiting from those things? And that is really important to me, because it feels so much better knowing that my rent goes directly to my landlord who lives next door to me, and it's, you know, supporting his family. Then you get into the corporization of the world, global corporization, you know, like Amazons and places like that. And it's like, where's that money going? You know, who is that feeding? Who is that looking after? Even in Myanmar at the moment, with all of the horrible things that are happening there are corporations that use the people there as staff, but all of a sudden they're not helping to rectify what's wrong there. So I don't know if this is answering your question, but it's basically like, I just see so much discord between business and humanity and sustainability, and it's like they've all been trying to be dealt with separately, when in actual fact it's down to the individual for us to firstly look after your own humanity and your own sustainability. You can't help other people outside of yourself until you help yourself. So that's why you've got to be in tune with your own body and what it is that you want to create. And then be really conscious with where you are spending your money and how are you spending your money. I love luxury. I love lovely things. I love feeling good. But you can still feel like that and be giving back to communities, rather than just this needing stuff to feel good. And, you know, that you may not know who actually created that down the line, and what family was affected by that, and how little they actually got to create that thing that you've spent thousands of dollars on, because some middleman's taken the big cut. So yeah, that's what I would love to bring more attention and more consciousness to how we are in the world at all times.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think that where this is really important is that your whole business, even though it's focusing a lot on face reading or the body it is all about self-awareness, and it's about really getting to know yourself and then making really ethical choices. And I think it's important that everybody who's listening today understands you also from that perspective and what your values and principles are around things, because someone does book in for a face reading, you're actually on the ground in a village, in a community, whereby you have that ability to go and buy your lunch that is impacting with the money that someone's given you for face reading, that's going to impact a whole family's life. And in a place like Bali, where they're not necessarily where so much of the money comes from tourism, they need people like yourself, Melanie, who are have got a global community of people that pay you to do your work, your incredible work, and then you're able to create impact at a local level. So I think that it's really beautiful what you're doing, and just the service you offer on an individual level, so insightful, but how the ripple effect can actually be felt down the line is what is really important and creates that purpose beyond just the profit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the same anywhere, though. It's not just even here. I think in your own neighborhood, the more you can work with local people, get to know, remember the days where you knew the butcher and you knew the fruit guy, and it's like we need to get back to that again. And I actually feel that when you get to know yourself, that level of consciousness automatically goes there. Like, you don't have to try. You because you have a different perspective on yourself, you're just going to have a different perspective on life anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you so much, Mel. It's been so great to learn more about this fascinating tool that you use every day, and I definitely want to know more. And I'm thinking the whole time about, do I have this? And about how you're just impacting the lives of those around you, and it's just so wonderful to see, and so amazing to connect with you again after this long time, and how much the world has changed. It seems like a lifetime ago that we were in Fiji together.
Yeah.
So if you've listened today, I'd love, both Melanie and I would love to know what your biggest takeaway is from today's conversation. We'll be posting the episode on YouTube and across all podcast listening apps and through social media. So wherever you happen to be listening to this episode or watching this episode, please leave a comment and let us know. If you'd like more information about what Melanie does, where can they find you, Mel?
You can go to my website, which is seed2soul, seedtosoul.com.au, or you can find me on Instagram or on Facebook under Melanie Mideggs.
Brilliant. And I'll put all those details on the show notes anyway. So if you've listened to this episode and you've really enjoyed it, please share it with your friends and consider subscribing to the Wellthy Living podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. To find out a bit more about my services, you can visit my website at wellthyliving.com.au or connect with me on any of my social media channels. So until next time, remember, connection is medicine.